We are here at the B20 Summit, and joining me now, I'd like to welcome Dr. Frank-Jürgen Richter. He is the chairman of Horasis, but he also was a former director at the World Economic Forum. Dr. Richter, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to be in South Africa. I see the momentum and I see that things are happening.
World Economic Forum and South Africa have had a very strong relationship because, of course, the late Tito Mboweni, who was our former Reserve Bank governor and, of course, finance minister, served on the World Economic Forum. We've had various South Africans that have played their part. How would you sum up, Dr. Richter, South Africa's G20 presidency from an economic perspective?
I believe that South Africa is a new hub for globalization, where people go for business opportunities. And South Africa is really carrying the spirit of the G20 and the B20 to be engaging, welcoming, collaborating with everybody. I think the country is really a friend of everybody, and it's all based on trust. And I think that's what we need, because trust is a currency of business, of growth, of further, initiatives into the future. I believe that from here, from the B20, G20, we can carry on and put all the theory in practice and have foreign companies coming here to invest, but also South African companies to invest overseas. A true win-win situation, a true partnership between South Africa and the world.
For that win-win situation to happen, Dr. Richter, the Global North has to play their part. The discussions that have been had is that the Global South is ready. It needs the Global North, the developed nations, to come. Have you seen it? Because what we have seen before is that the Global South needs to look after themselves, Africa needs to look after themselves, and nobody seems to have a sense of uniformity. In the year 2025, with geopolitical tensions, with trade barriers that are occurring, surely now is the time that the Global North says, if we're going to broaden our economic base, let's go ahead and have us partnering with the Global South.
I fully agree, and the so-called Global North should come to Africa and other places in the Global South for the opportunities, and not just giving aid, because aid is something short-term oriented, but really to invest deeply here. And investment is always like a win-win for everybody. It's not a zero-sum game, but everybody, right, will take advantage of it. The Global North, of course, includes many different nations. And maybe you might allude to the current kind of, I wouldn't say conflict, but the tensions, the trade tensions between the US and South Africa. But I think Europe is ready. Countries like Germany, for example, or where I'm based, Switzerland, a lot of large Swiss companies investing here in South Africa. They're ready, but I should do more. And we need also, the political class to join and give the right signals to the private sector. At the end of the day, I would love to see a world where we are not talking about the Global South and the Global North, but just about one world. And, all of us working together. And I believe that the B20 and the G20 is the right tool for that, because we have countries from the north, countries from the south, in all joining hands for a better world.
But Dr. Richter, here's the issue. US President Donald Trump doesn't see it that way, because in his eyes, when he talks about South Africa, it's in a very negative way. I don't want to get into the political stuff of this. Those trade barriers that have been hit with South Africa. But then you get the European Union, which, of course, has met with President Cyril Ramaphosa, whether it's Ursula von der Leyen, whether it's Mr. Antonio Costa, have said, we are willing to trade with South Africa. We are willing to do business with South Africa. We are willing to have the diplomatic ties with South Africa. Is the US looking at this and saying, oh, maybe we made a mistake? Because it kind of seems the rhetoric from Washington is completely different, completely isolated from that of the rest of the world, which wants uniformity and wants inclusive economic growth.
Inclusive economic growth is really the right buzzword, and I would even say the European Union. You mentioned Ursula von der Leyen. I think the European Union maybe might need South Africa more than vice versa, because you have minerals. You have a very young workforce. I think demographics are in your favor, whereas Europe is kind of aging and silvering. And I think it's only positive, right, what's happening between the European Union and South Africa. Talking about sanctions, did you know that the sanctions imposed by the US on Switzerland are higher than those imposed on South Africa? They were 48%, 48%. And only last week, there was a negotiation going on, and they decreased again to 15%. And I can bet with you the same thing will happen with South Africa. Now the sanctions, are very high. I mean, the trade sanctions and what you have to pay in plus on top, but it will also go down because also US needs South Africa. There is no way that US can move ahead without having this partnership with South Africa. So it's only like in this moment, and as President Trump says, it's all about a deal, which is a very transactional view, of course. I would like to see it more long-term and more stable. But in this deal, I guess that sooner or later, the trade sanctions will also be lowered in our case.
But here's the thing, Dr. Richter. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, is there not a knee-jerk reaction that's coming from the US? Because if you're going to have global economic growth, there has to be a holistic view on it. But then you've got a leader in the US who wakes up one morning and decides something, and wakes up the following morning and decides something else. And this supposed rhetoric coming from the world's most powerful economy is not healthy. And when you see what the global south is doing, there seems to be a huge movement in terms of the trade that is happening there. So I think it's in the best interest. Wouldn't you agree with me? In the best interest of the US to sit down, have sober discussions. 2 words, sober discussions on how the world needs to move forward from an economics perspective.
We need dialogue, right? And we need have the sober discussions you mentioned, not only sober, but also very solid and on a level playing field of both partners sitting together. Because, as you mentioned, now the Global South is looking into new opportunities to enlarge the trade volume with new partners. Even India and China now are speaking a lot. And both countries were divided politically for a long time, and this is not in the favor of the US. So for the Global South, it might be even a blessing in disguise that we got this kind of trade sanctions going on for this year, because now we can look into other opportunities. And at one point, maybe I'm always saying presidents come and go. It's the same case in Europe, in South Africa, or in the US. There's always a day after. So I'm sure that globalization is here to stay. And American companies, their profit, their vision is based on globalization. They have to export, they have to work with global partners. So at the end of the day, I think we will go back to the old school of globalization. But by the meanwhile, the Global South will say, okay, we are more independent. We have new partners, even maybe like a BRICS currency in the future.
What is your take on that, Dr. Richter? Apologies for coming in, sure. Because a European nation in Russia, can consider that is speaking on that. I know Russia currently facing sanctions from the European Union for the war that is happening in Ukraine. This talk of BRICS currency, China is saying there's a discussion. They've roped in 2 major economies, right. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates from the Middle East.
Yeah, and of course India. Right?
And India also, right. Exactly, from a fintech perspective.
Right.
Is Washington, I'm sorry I'm bringing Washington into this because they are the world's leading economy. And surely they're looking at this and saying, there is a strong possibility if we continue to isolate ourselves from how the world operates economically.
I mean, the BRICS currency won't come tomorrow, right? It will take maybe another 4 to 5 years. And it will come if the US likes it or not. But it won't be a real currency, right? It will be like a crypto type of stable coin for the trade. But it's going to happen. And if it's going to happen sooner or later, I think the US dollar will come under pressure and won't be maybe the lead currency in the future, which will have very severe consequences for the US economy, because the US economy is based on debt, on printing money. And so this would be a dramatic impact. So if I would put myself into the shoes of the US administration, I would try to embrace the Global South, to collaborate and maybe say we have one currency, including US dollar in some way, into the basket because you don't want to make enemies, right? And it will harm your own economy on the long term. But if you look into the BRICS, of course, they are all different economies, right? What is, let's say, the kind of similarity between Brazil and India? Or India and South Africa, right? They're totally different, but united by the world to say that, the South is awakening and there's a counterpart in the world. Europe is shrinking. I mean, Europe's influence in the world is shrinking. So it's a historical chance we are seeing right now.
Africa's debt burden. A lot of the discussion that's been happening within this B20, within the G20 presidency is, can we lower Africa's debt burden, number one? Or number two, can the global north come and say, let's maybe potentially wipe it off with certain clauses, with certain agreements? What is your take on that, Dr. Richter?
Yeah, it needs to be, I wouldn't say wiped off totally, but maybe incrementally to help. Actually, yesterday, Trevor Manuel, he mentioned that the rating agencies have to change and put some pressure on the rating agency. Here I disagree, because the rating agencies are based on economic rationale and they're not listening to politics. Even like President Trump tries to put pressure on them, but he's not succeeding. But apart from the rating agencies, I think developed nations of the North have to sit together and to see what can we do to partially remove the burden, especially on the most challenged countries, which is actually not South Africa. South Africa is the most advanced, but maybe countries like Burundi, take for example Liberia or the Central African Republic,
or Sudan.
Or Sudan, both Sudan, the North and the South, right? War-torn countries, because it all starts with social instability, and then warlords might come in and fight, right? And then you have civil war, and I think here the global North has to be taken responsible, not to send troops. Don't take me wrong, but to help them economically to stand up and to build on their own economic dream, their own vision for the future.
One final question, Dr. Richter, because we are running out of time. The Global South, South Africa's presidency, how close or how far are we to economic inclusive growth?
South Africa is doing a good job. When you're here in Johannesburg, you feel like being New York or London. But of course, right, there are other places, right, on the countryside. And there's still people living in shanty towns. And but it's not only here in South Africa. It's also happening in Brazil. It's in India. But I think everybody looks into South Africa to be like the lead, the model, right, the role model to solve it. And especially, I think, the president himself, it's on his personal agenda to close a gap, to have more like an inclusive growth. And we at Horasis actually would like to support it. We are in discussion with the government to put our main summit into South Africa next year. And the theme would be actually inclusive economic growth, collaboration, joining hands, and to make globalization more human, more inclusive.
Dr. Frank-Jürgen Richter, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great talking to you. Thank you so much.